Okay. Good morning, all. So today we are very fortunate to have Professor Lekha Chakraborty with us in person to interact with you all. So I'm sure that she doesn't need any introduction, as we know very well about Madam, because she is very well part of all our academic activities, both online as well as offline. So we got an opportunity to meet her in person, especially for the first year batches. I think they are in gift. They are meeting Madam first time, and this is the basic idea of this talk is to have an open interaction with you with regard to something related on public finance or in general, so that you can have a free discussion. So I'm not going to introduce in detail, but a brief about Madam. So she is currently the professor at NIPF, and she is holding various positions, academic collaborations with the various institutions, to name a few for the first year students. And she is the elected member of governing board of management at International Institute of Public Finance, Munich, as well as she has been visiting professor at various universities like London School of Economics, then American University, and also Uppsala University in Sweden, and Catalan University in Canada, and so on. And her CV is very vast. And the one thing which I would say is very eminent personality in public finance as far as macroeconomics and public Indian public finance is concerned. So you can go through in detail the CV and look at the publications, and two books I could see that Fiscal Policies for Sustainable Development in Asia Pacific, Gender Budgeting in India, which is published by Palgrave, as well as Fiscal Consolidation, Budget Deficit and Macroeconomics by Sage. And you can look into these publications and see, read all those articles. And on behalf of Kulati Institute of Finance and Taxation, as well as PhD committee, I'm warmly welcoming you to gift to deliver this lecture. And thank you. Now over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So when I came last time here, Ashka was there, Arun. Arun was there, but there are many new faces, but we met online, right? Ritik and his friends. Professor Joseph asked me to speak to you about the fundamentals of the public finance, especially in terms of the economics of government. So how we can do today is I will give you a brief, flair of this topic within 10-20 minutes. Then I will open the floor. Then you can ask me your concerns. So that's the way. I have a little, a small PPT, but I will share it later. Okay. So I structured my presentation today into three segments. First, I will take you through the determinants of the economics of government, a few theories related to the public theories. Then I will take you through the theoretical debates related to the fiscal stance, and then the public financing theories. So these are the three important segments I'm planning to deliver today. So when I talk about the determinants of government, we have to start with the perceived market failure, because that's the beginning of the role of the government. So this perceived market failures that got captured into the preliminary public goods theories. I think you have done public goods theories earlier. Yeah, so I will just quickly go through that. So this public good theories capture that perceived market failures. And you know about the Samuelson's seminal articles. You must have read that already. Then the theory of club goods by Buchanan and the public choice theories. Then there is a link between even the democracy and the public expenditure decisions. So I will take you through that voting preferences, how they translate into the public expenditure. Then you must have learned about this Peacock-Weissman theories, right? Like it's not like a secular growth, it's like a spurt or a sudden displacement effect. So these are the preliminary theories. So to understand these public goods theories, what I identified as a very good source of reading is Alan Peacock's The Economics of Government, that book. It's started there in the library of us. Alan Peacock's Economics of Government. It's a very good book. And when I speak about Alan Peacock, you know who is Alan Peacock? He's a London school. He was a London School of Economics professor, and he was the thesis supervisor of Professor I.S. Gulati. Yeah. So we can all apply a transitivity theorem now, okay? Okay, so Alan Peacock, he's a wonderful writer, wonderful professor. So read the works of Alan Peacock. The Peacock-Weismann hypothesis, no, it's that Alan Peacock. So I read an article, a book by Alan Peacock on the economics of government, and I highly recommend you to read that. So in that, his starting point is that, as I mentioned earlier, the principle of the public goods that rest with the theory or the existence of market failure. And we need to identify the goods and services or goods which retain the publicness. That's the importance, right now when we talk about the public goods, because the commodities or the goods that is not retaining the characteristics of publicness these days with PPP or, any other methodology if we look into, that doesn't retain the characteristics of the public goods. So we need to identify the goods which retain the characteristics of public good, and that's the role of the government. So next, then we have to think about the financing pattern of the public goods. It is not easy because as citizens or as consumers, we won't reveal our preferences in terms of financing a public good because we pay taxes or we do not pay taxes. The public goods can be enjoyed by everybody. So you can understand the difficulty in which we can do the financing of a public good. So, these are the tough decisions we need to take. Now, the elementaries, what's the difference between a public and a private good? And the main components of a public good, if you look into, that is non-excludability. You're not excluding anybody. Then the second important element is what you call the non-rival. Okay. And, but the frequently cited example of a public good, especially by, Alan Peacock and recently by Stiglitz is lighthouse. So we need to ask the question if lighthouse is a public good. And it's a repetition. This example is a repetition for the students who attended my class last time. Last time we debated it. Like I opened the floor and asked whether you believe that the public good, lighthouse is a public good. But today I will just take you through that. Lighthouse in the sense why it is a public good, it is because the beam of the light that is guarding the ship, that beam of light is a public good. So there are controversies related to this, and there's a nostalgic debate in the field of public economics about the lighthouse, like the beam of the, that lighthouse guarding the ship can be a public good because it can be excludable if we can, and it can also be not non-rival, because if congestion starts in the water, then it becomes non-rival. And excludability in the sense, what we visualized is that if the technology, of course, it will be that cost will be exorbitant, but we can, ask certain ships not to be entering into the water using the technology. So using that technological bars, we can prevent the ships from enjoying the beam of light from this lighthouse. So exclusion is possible, but at a technically high cost. So that's a way. And this is a debate, and Samuelson proved again and again it is a public good, but Coase came in. Ronald Coase, who got the Nobel Prize, he came in and argued that lighthouse cannot be a public good, but Coase didn't come from the point of view of the marginal cost. Like if a extra ship entering the water, that the marginal, but that's zero in enjoying the beam of the light. So he's not coming from the perspective of the marginal cost principles, but Coase used historical examples, like in Britain, in Ireland, they have used the private sector to guard the ships using the lighthouse. Then later it was taken up by the government because it was the hazards, occupational hazard was huge, because they used to take the coal to the top of the lighthouse, and in the night they're guarding the ship. So occupational hazard is very high. And who will do that? He should be such broad-minded philanthropist who can do this function to guard the ships. Otherwise, he doesn't have any personal interest on this. And later on, the government took it up in Ireland and Britain. Okay. A lot of notes I have written. I will recommend you to read Course 1974, The Lighthouse in Economics. It came in JLE, Journal of Labor Economics, volume 17. So this is a very good article to read, Course 1974. Then, of course, the other references are Samuelson 1969 and 1970. Okay, so as I mentioned, the policy implication that is arising from this non-rival and non-excludability is that, this service needs to be supplied at a zero cost. So that's the way it is designed. Now, I mentioned already that the exclusion is technically possible and non-rival till the moment of congestion. If the water is congested, then that non-rival that can also be attacked. But when we think about opening the provisioning of a public good like lighthouse to a private sector, certain things we should keep in the mind. Like we cannot open it to a competitive, market condition, because if a lot of people are guarding the ship, that competitive lighting can confuse the mariner. So we need to apply a monopoly if we are opening this lighthouse to a private sector. So monopoly is one thing. Second, we need to take care of the free riders. Then third, we need to ensure property rights. For the island or for the lighthouse, we need to apply the property rights. So these are the characteristics we need to keep in the mind the moment we try to open up a provisioning of the lighthouse or a public good. Okay. Now, you have read this mechanism design literature. It's like Herwig's, Maxon. A lot of people got Nobel Prize in the mechanism design literature. So that talks about the public goods theories only. There is a conditionality or a convergence or an iteration they will do, in the sense they need to balance three things or simultaneously arrive at three conditions. And Hurwitz, he tried to do the algorithm, but he couldn't solve that three conditions simultaneously. But ideal mechanism design of a public good is, three conditions. One is, of course, the Pareto optimality. We should not make anybody worse off by making some better off. So one is Pareto optimality. Second is incentive compatibility, like what the government provide to the citizens and what citizens need. There should be an incentive compatibility for paying taxes or anything. That is a second condition. Third condition, it is not plausible at all. That is related to the balanced budget. So attaining these three conditions simultaneously, and it's a mathematical economist, they work towards this using the algorithm. So they could never solve this issue, like simultaneously solving it to Pareto optimality, incentive compatibility, and balanced budget. That is impossible. So you can read Herwig's Nobel speech, that Nobel Prize, when he got the Nobel Prize. You have to deliver a speech. So that speech is very well written, non-technical manner. So you can read that literature. And Herwig's, he mentioned that it is not plausible to arrive at the three simultaneously, but mathematicians, economists, they try to arrive at the condition by solving at least two. Three we can't solve. So here, if we can't use the static public goods theories to designing the functionings and the financing of a public good, then you can understand that how tough it's to design, the sources of financing for a completely non-rival and completely non-excludable good. What's the source of financing? If we say, sorry, we are not able to enjoy any benefits from this, defense, for that example, maybe border states will be benefiting more than us, or even a park, we are not using the park, or any point. If you get into a pure public good concept, but pure public good is very limited these days because it's all impure the moment you integrate the elements of congestion to it. So it's difficult. But when you mathematically try it, the capital X, if it is the summation of all the public goods, then unlike private good. Private good means, you can take x1 plus x2. That will be the capital X. Like whatever I consume, the remaining portion only he can consume. So it's a private good. Then the pricing policy works. But pricing policy fails when you are enjoying from a commodity equally. That is capital X is equal to the small x1 is equal to x2 is equal to x3. Everybody is enjoying equally. It is not the summation, it's an equality. So that's a technical difference between the private and the public good. The private good, the total can be parceled among the many components, but the private good, it is a summation. It is x1 is equal to x2. So it's an equality rather than summation. So I have presented before you two extreme cases of a private good and a public good. Private good, excludable, rival. Private good, excludable, rival. Non-public good, non-excludable, non-rival. But in between these two sets, you can have some degrees of, elements into it, like a club good. Club good, you relax the assumption of exclusion. Okay, so because you can exclude people the moment you take a prize for the people to enter into the lecture room, then it is like an excludable commodity. It's a club commodity. And when you do the Zoom meetings, it's a club commodity because you won't allow anybody to enter into it unless you register. So it's a club commodity. And earlier, before the satellite revolution, people used to look into the waves, the broadcasting waves. That used to be the public good. But now we cannot talk about it after the satellite revolution. Then, a lot of examples you can work out. And club good, exclusion is possible, but it need not be non-rival. But can it be rival? Of course, when you put the elements of congestion, because the seats are limited here. So then you have to sit or you have to stand and listen. Or in a swimming pool, if you can do the water polo using the confined number of swimmers, that's fine. But if more people get into the pool, then it is a rival, it's non-rival. So that's a club good. Then another element is the CPR, the common property rights. So in between the public and private, you have the club good and the CPR. CPR in the sense, what is possible? Exclusion is not possible. Everybody can come and access, but rivalry can happen. The moment you talk about the common property resources. So there is a matrix over there. I'm not presenting that. You can understand that you put excludable and non-excludable on the side and down, and rival and non-rival, and you fit in private as excludable and rival, then common property resources as non-excludable and rival, then club goods, non-rival and excludable, then your public good, non-excludable, non-rival. So that matrix is there. Now, in a way, decentralization theories also look into these aspects, like Tibu hypothesis you have learned, no? It's like voting with the feet. So in a way, that's also a club good, that you design your jurisdiction by voting with the feet. So there are literature which looks into this club good, not only by Buchanan, but also by the decentralized theorist, by applying this Tibu hypothesis, voting with the feet and all. So you can take a look into that and, work out at the decentralized level. And other decentralization theorems you're familiar with, Oates theorem and all. Yeah, like the important decisions needs to be taken at the level of the government that is closest to the people. That is principle of subsidiarity. So when we talk about the public goods, these decisions are not just confined to the top level of government. It is open to the subnational levels of government as well. But it needs to be coded with the decentralization theories. Now, okay, again, I am getting back to the demand revealing mechanisms. So this is related to the mechanism design. And when we talk about the demand revealing mechanisms, a group of citizens can reveal their demand sincerely, but a group of citizens reveal their demand very strategically. So if most of the citizens are revealing the demand strategically, as finance ministers, or we are in the finance ministry, how we will design the public goods for you. Okay. So that sincere versus strategic revealing of preferences affect the financing pattern of a public good. So you can understand how important it is when it comes to the financing pattern of the public goods. Because if the citizens are revealing their demands very strategically, it is tough, because pricing we can't apply when it comes to the public good. So it's a matter of concern. That you can read the lintel wixel mechanisms. There are a lot of mechanism designs. One important mechanism design is done by lintel and wixel. In the sense, they mentioned about an atomized tax instead of an aggregate tax. Atomized tax in the sense, if a group of citizens, they are mentioning that their revealed preference for a particular public good is relatively higher than other set of citizens, what I do, they will pay me more. And those who say it is an atomized taxes, individualistic taxes rather than an aggregate tax, and the other set, they will pay less because they say, no, we don't enjoy much. And in the long run, we are wishing away free riders issues, but in the long run, there will be a convergence in the manner in which those who pay more, they reduce their consumption of that particular good. Those who pay less, they will increase. So these are all very wishful kind of a mechanism design and the convergence mechanisms. But that's exactly what Windel and Lixel mechanism speaks about. What is the practical point of this? It is important for us to design the taxes, but if the unit of tax paid by the citizen and the utility you derive from the public service provisioning, if there is no link, if that Vixelian link fails, then you don't feel like paying taxes. That may be the difference in the behavioral pattern when you look into the fiscal policy, why there is in a kind of happiness when people are asked to pay more in Scandinavian countries, and why there is a rich vocabulary of tax evasion in the context of emerging world. So people love to pay taxes if there is a Vixelian link. But the moment Vixelian link breaks, then we don't love to pay taxes. So those are the theoretical ways in which the demand revealing mechanisms. So I mentioned to you earlier what is an ideal mechanism design. It should be a mechanism where the supply of goods should be Pareto optimal. Then everybody finds it to the self-interest to tell the truth. So there should be a incentive compatibility, and the public goods budget needs to be balanced. So that's the ideal mechanism design. Okay. Yeah, lintel wixel I mentioned. Now, I don't have to get into the Wagner and Peacock-Weisman theories in detail, I feel, because Wagner, you know that there is a relationship between the growth and the public expenditure. You can empirically test it using the unit of government, whether it is country, where states, you can take a whatever unit of analysis you would love to. So that's like a secular pattern in which the link between the economic growth and the public expenditure is linked. But many times that secular link may not be the reason why you have a spurt in the public spending. So those theories I mentioned earlier, that Peacock-Weisman hypothesis, what could be that spurts? It could be a war, it could be COVID, it could be global financial crisis. So there are many points in the history. If you look into the history, there are many points in which the spurts in public expenditure occurs. So we can identify that, and the elements of this kind of public policy is a counter-cyclical public policy, in the sense, if the economy is in the low turn, you pump prime, otherwise the government back out if the economy is doing well. So we believe in those business cycles the moment we take up the counter-cyclicality. But now, the growth theorists, they even question the existence of the business cycles, because business cycles doesn't exist in the context of emerging economies. And there are works by Geeta Gopinath, that cyclist trend paper you can look into. But there, if there is no strict business cycles, if you cannot date, proper, times in which it takes the upturn and the downturn, if you can't date the business cycles, then even monetary policy, not only the fiscal policy, if they act as a counter-cyclical policy tool, you won't be able to address the concerns related to the growth. Then we get into the structural reforms and all. Okay, now, the next part of my session is the debates related to the fiscal policy stance. So there are many debates. I think Steffi presented that day the fiscal and monetary policy coordination, right? You mentioned about the fiscal theories of price determination that day. No, no, no. Okay. Oh, that was a different. It was a JNU student. He or she, they looked into the fiscal and monetary policy coordination to understand the ways in which the financing pattern of deficit is determined. In the sense, you know, over the years, nations, they deny or they it decreased the financing of the deficits through seigniorage. And seigniorage is nothing but the high powered money in the economy to GDP, the change in the high powered money. So, why do you want to decrease the seigniorage component? Because you expected that inflationary pressures in the economy will go up the moment you do a seigniorage financing. So, over the years, we controlled that and moved to the bond financing of deficit, external and internal. In many countries, it is external component is high, but they have balance of payment crisis and all. In India, it is internal financing of deficit through the bond markets. But the theories and the empirical evidence related to the bond financing, whether it controlled the inflationary pressures or not, that's an important question because we tried um, bond financing of deficit. We moved away from seigniorage financing of deficit is to control inflation. But we won't be able to control the inflation if the real rate of interest is above the real growth of economy. Because if the real rate of interest goes beyond the real growth of economy, we have to eventually do the seigniorage financing of deficit, because we can't go on with the the bond financing of deficit. That is why this theory is called unpleasant monetary arithmetic. This is done by Sargent and Wallace. They also Nobel winning economist. Sargent and Wallace, in his theories, it is mentioned that bond financing, whether inflation today or inflation tomorrow, is the only flexibility. But that shift in the pattern of deficits, financing pattern of deficits from seigniorage to bond, will not ensure you, low inflation in the economy, because you need to check that criteria whether R is greater than G. The moment R is greater than G, you do eventual not demonetization, monetization of deficit. The moment you monetize the deficit, again, inflationary pressure is on the high. So this theory has got a new version. That is fiscal theories of price determination. This is done by, the Chicago School of Thought, by Cochrane, by Woodford. Many economists look into the fiscal theories of price determination, which is the new version of the unpleasant monetary arithmetic. And they, talk about pegging the policy rates by the center bank. If they peg the policy rates by the center bank through this inflationary expectations and the output gap channel, that is getting into the path of the fiscal side. In the sense, the price determination is not completely monetary. The price determination can be fiscal as well. In the sense, the inflationary pressures can be fiscal as well. You can understand it is closely correlated to the unpleasant monetary arithmetic. The moment you decide on a particular financing pattern of the deficit, that can go inflationary. So fiscal policy is inflationary. So that fiscal side of the monetary policy stance, or the fiscal side of the price determination, is explained by the Cochrane and Woodford. But it is very simple. This literature on price determination, or the fiscal theories of price determination, is nothing but it is closely correlated to inflation targeting. Okay, because what they explain is just similar to the inflation targeting. Like, you peg your policy rate based on the inflationary expectations and anger and the output gap. This is nothing but inflation targeting. But the moment you finance your deficit predominantly through the monetization, then the fiscal policy can be inflationary. This is also empirically tested and theoretically derived by many economists. I'm talking only the tip of the iceberg. More, if you're feeling interested in this fiscal theories of price determination, you can read more. Okay, Pulapre Balakrishnan, after reading this article, he got very much interested in the price theory of this fiscal theories of price determination, because this is also closely correlated to the helicopter money. Like your public policy stance is determining that you give money into the hands of people rather than providing employment, then it is inflationary. So it's closely correlated to the helicopter money literature, that you can take a look into the helicopter money. But in the COVID time, we debated about this helicopter money, but no countries have opened the helicopter money, because overheating can happen if you go beyond a point, the Sinrage financing of deficit or helicopter money. Now, the second important debate is related to the predominantly bond financing. And bond financing, you understand that there is a loanable funds market. And if you preempt the resources to finance the deficit, it can lead to rise in the interest rate. This you have to test empirically. And I have done a paper recently on the RBI interest rate determination. And RBI interest rate determination, we can't say that the deficit is the villain behind this interest rate, because the interest rate is not predominantly affected by the fiscal deficit. How do you test this? It can be empirically tested. And again, the unit of analysis you need to determine, and the frequency of the data you need to determine. Because if the frequency of the data is high frequency data, you can work out into the new monetary policy regime whether the fiscal deficit is a predominant determinant of interest rate. But if you want to do a hysteresis, you can't do much related to this question of interest rate and fiscal deficit. Why? Because we had administered regime of interest rates till 1992 or 1991. So how do you tackle a non-varying data? That's an important question you need to tackle the moment you get into this price determination, interest rate determination literature. So then you have to apply the Fisher effect, take out the inflationary expectations, make the interest rate real, use the real interest rates into your model. Then you have to check whether there is financial repression in the economy. And a thumb rule to understand the financial repression is to look into the interest rates. Whether interest rates are negative, that's a thumb rule to give you a feel that there is financial repression. Now, after tackling that non-varying interest rate, then the other thing, you cannot have a bivariate analysis of interest rate and deficit. You need to include many control variables. The control variables could be inflationary expectations. Again, that is an unobserved variable. You need to proxy the inflationary expectations. Maybe in many countries like Livingston survey in US, we also have inflation expectation survey. We can use that expectation survey variable into that. Otherwise, we need to generate using that what do you call rational expectation hypothesis or adaptation. We proxy the previous inflation to the present. That's a way, most of the models take the adaptation hypothesis into taking that unobserved variable. Then we need to open it up. It is an open economy macro model. So we need to incorporate the external sector variables into the model. So capital flows will be there. Capital flows indeed affect the interest rate. So many variables we need to integrate rather than interest rate and deficit by variate model. So incorporated inflationary expectations, incorporated the external sector open economy model variables, then macroeconomic uncertainties. How do you capture uncertainties? It is very tough. So usually people capture macroeconomic uncertainties through output gap. Output gap in the sense you take the difference between the potential output and the actual output and take the difference, and you use filters, Kalman or HP filter to arrive at the potential output. Like you work with that trend component of the series by taking out the cyclicality. So you have many variables now. Interest rate determination is a function of deficits. Macroeconomic uncertainty is captured through output gap. Then you have external variables, either capital flows or rear or near or anything. Then you incorporated the inflationary expectations. Then what else? When we talk about the interest rate determination, you can think about it, and then you have to start analyzing the data. If you're working with the annual data, then the time series will be a matter of concern, because a time series is limited. You can't run a meaningful model within a very short time series model. So you have to get into the econometric literature, which sorted out the time series for you. And time series, how do you want to sort it out? First, you do the pre-test. Then you get into the co-integration, and then you get into this model like ECM, error correction and all, right? There are many methodologies in which you can correct and you can work with a short time series. One could be Todo and Yamamoto in Econometrica, they have analyzed. So it's like a order of integration and the order of the lag lengths. They work with that, and they don't mind if the order of integration of the variables are I1 and I0. It's a mix, because usually we economists fear that all the variables should be integrated of the same order. Otherwise, our world stops over there. We can't do anything else. But now there are ways in which we can proceed. One is Todo and Yamamoto. Second is maximum entropy ensembles methodology. Using R package, we can do that analysis. Like, you create ensembles and bootstrap it, and your new coefficient will be taken within the confidence interval of the ensembles rather than the coefficient you run from the limited time series. So these are the two important ways in which you can work with the short time series data. Third is ARDL. ARDL also, allows you to work with the short time series. Okay, then the speed of adjustment of the coefficient, everything you can work out if you use the ARDL. Now, high frequency data, there is no problem, because we have enough observations, and you're free to do any time series methodology if you want to apply for the high frequency data. And high frequency data, of course, interest rate is there. The cutoff yield rate of various interest rate is there, but the cutoff yield rate in the bond market, that frequency is not exactly monthly. It is less than monthly. So you need to take a decision. Cutoff yield rate, what exactly you're going to take, whether the last that variable reported within the particular month, or is it an average? So you need to take a decision. Usually I take the last one reported as a cutoff yield rate. So you need to work with these interest rates in detail to understand the link between the interest rate and the deficits. And this question is important, because if you're getting an answer in affirmative, that shows the existence of the financial crowding out in India. So this is a test for financial crowding out. And financial crowding out can be ruled out if there is no link between the fiscal deficit and the interest rate. But if there is an interest rate, if the transmission channel is through the rate of interest, then we need to work with the bond financing pattern of deficit and the private investment crowding out phenomenon. But direct crowding out is easy to work into. Like, you have to take the public investment and private investment. If there is a displacement, you say that there is a direct crowding out. And read Blinder and Solo's paper, Does Fiscal Policy Matter? It came in 1980s. That's a beautiful paper. Does Fiscal Policy Matter? So he talks about different levels of crowding out, the direct, the financial. Then he also gets into this bond markets in detail. Bond market is a net wealth. That's another important article that also you can read. Okay. So these are the two important debates. One is unpleasant monetary arithmetic, and the new version of that is price theories, fiscal theories of price determination. The another important, debate exists is related to the crowding out. That is very important to the current union budget as well, because we are pegging very high deficits in our country. So we need to closely tie to the capex formation, which crowds in private investment. It's not crowding out private investment. But if you ask me, despite having this high fiscal deficit and capex focus, why the private investment is shy, my answer is geopolitical uncertainties and macroeconomic uncertainties. How do you model uncertainties? You need to look into, because we tried with low interest rate regime, private investment didn't happen much. So it's a monetary policy variable, fiscal policy variable. Both are not working perfectly for private investment means. It's more than the macroeconomic fundamentals. It's a general geopolitical polycrisis and macroeconomic uncertainty, to me, is an important variable that is causing the private sector to be shy. This is my take. Otherwise, you have to get into the lags. You apply the proper parameterization of the model, apply proper lags in the lagged model, at which lag the private investment is showing a kind of responsiveness or the attractiveness that you have to test. That's a different way of looking at it. Now, okay, intertemporal budget constraint, you know, right? What is an intertemporal budget constraint? It's like an equation, but I can mention it to you. It's a delta D, that is the deficit. Okay, is equal to, I will tell you, you can write it down. You open a square bracket, that is CG plus IG minus T, close the square brackets. Okay, what I mentioned within the square bracket is the consumption expenditure and investment expenditure. That is, CG is a revenue expenditure, IG is the capital expenditure. Then you have to deduct the entire net, what do you call that, you have to deduct the borrowing component from the receipt side. You have to put that T, which is net of your borrowing. So that's the thing, delta DG, that is a fiscal deficit, is equal to the square bracket open, CG plus IG minus T, square bracket closed. So here what I'm explaining is the revenue expenditure plus capital expenditure, that is a total expenditure minus taxes. Then you have another component, because this I am talking only about the primary part. Oh yeah, I will go to, I will explain this and go to the board and explain to you these equations. Thank you so much. I thought it is on the other side last time when I came. Now it is ready. I will speak to you with the board. Okay, so let me complete this node board part and I'll go to the board. Okay. Mm, okay, that's it. Let me explain to you that and come back. You have a pen, right? Okay. Thanks for arranging this. So what I mentioned is the DG, right? This DG is the fiscal deficit component. And uh, this fiscal deficit component, you can do with CG and IG. This is your revenue budget, and this is your capex budget. Thanks. Capex. And we can deduct that from the total non-debt creating receipts. This is what I mentioned. The intertemporal budget constraint equation I'm trying. And now, there's another part that is R into the past debt. So I'm taking it as like, the interest rate into the past debt is your interest payments, right? So this is the interest payments. Now what will happen? You can understand that the total fiscal deficit minus interest payments give you the primary thing, right? So this is a primary component. Okay. Now, the question related to this is, now comes the public policy questions. Now the question related to the fiscal rule is, we need to tackle the fiscal deficit as the operational parameter, or we need to tackle the primary deficit as the operational parameter. There are many economists who believe that we need to focus on primary component. In the sense, the primary component, this R is exogenous, like the rate of interest is not in your hand. This is the past liabilities. So you need to focus on the current fiscal policy stance. So you need to focus on the primary. We can have a debate when I open the floor. So that's the way it is debated, whether we have to focus on the fiscal deficit, then entire thing will come. And we started with the master treaty of 3%. There is no cap for the primary deficit. Should we be moving from this to this is a question. And you can read the annexure of the fiscal rules in our country, the FRBM, in 2018, Arvind Subramaniam has written about the importance of the primary deficit. And now, I also mentioned about the monetized deficit and the unmonetized, unpleasant monetary arithmetic, in which we control the monetized deficit. Now, the question, this is a rewind of what I have spoken already. We can finance the fiscal deficit through three ways. The first I mentioned about the seigniorage financing of the deficit. Seigniorage is nothing but the change in the high-powered money to GDP. Okay, if you increase the seigniorage financing of the deficit, that will immediately shoot up your monetary base. And you take a look into this variable on reserve money in the RBI bulletin or RBI hand book of Indian economy. You can understand what are the different components of the seigniorage or the high-powered money. We also call it as reserve money. So here, two important components of it. One is the debt with the central bank. That is, the credit you give it to the government by the central bank. So the entire, the debt can be the debt from the central bank to the government and the debt from the bond markets. There are two important components. Then there is another important component, Forex. So you can understand the different components of the reserve money the moment you open that table in the context of India. So net RBI credit to the government over the years, you can empirically prove that it came down. The monetized deficit you can work out from this variable within the reserve money if you are looking for the data. Now, Forex. Now, I also mentioned that the total debt can be this debt from the central bank credit to the government and the debt with the public, that is the bond market. So let us split this component just to rearrange that the total debt, if I take it this side, that can be financed by this MB. This I split and took it other side. So I'm just keeping here the D with the public only. Then you run down the Forex. So this is the way. There are many equations in between, but finally we reach to this financing pattern of deficit by arguing that it can be seigniorage, it can be bond financing, it can be external financing. Now, in order to understand the impact of the deficit, because you are asking to maintain a 3% by the Maastricht Treaty or anything for that matter, because of the impact of deficit on the macroeconomy. So you need to argue why you want 3%. The main reason is this macroeconomic impact of deficit on the economy. If you fail to prove that these things happen, then why do you want to keep this 3%? Question number one. Okay, investors' confidence and credit rating agency, that will come in another way that relates to the level of deficit. But it is not the level of deficit that matter. You have to also look into the financing pattern of the deficit to understand the impact of the macroeconomic consequences. So excessive use of any mode, seigniorage or bond financing or external, that create macroeconomic consequences in different manner. In the sense, if you use more seigniorage financing of deficit, that can go inflationary. If you use the bond financing beyond a point, that can lead to crowding out. But everything you need to empirically test. I am giving you the theoretical thing. And of course, the capex, this can lead to the problems related to the what happened in Sri Lanka. That can happen if you do more external financing of deficit. That relates to your capital flight, that relates to exchange rate variations. Many things can happen. In India, there is a table in RBI, and also you can take a look into the budget at a glance. In that document also, there is a table which explains. RBI is the good source of doing this intertemporally. So you can understand that the predominantly in India, we do bond financing. And then the question is, there is a crowding out in real sense, in direct sense, or in a financial crowding out sense. You need to empirically work it out. Then you have to prove that it is crowding in instead of crowding out, or there is a crowding out. You can do that. And this is insignificant in the context of India. And in India, whatever happens in this is like we have the current account and the capital account, right? Capital flows. So this gap X minus M, when it was a concern, we tried many things related to the import and many policies related to the export competitiveness and all. But the presence of export in the international market is very insignificant. So what we were doing, we are financing this X minus M gap with the capital flows, the capital account of the balance of payment that was financing this. Then the moment the interest rate by the US Fed Reserve is going high, the capital flight will happen. So we do an interest defense in the case of India. If you don't do this, this will fly. If the capital flight happens, then we became very panic because we are unable to even finance this current account deficit. So it's an important matter of concern, but these are all happening from the interest rate defense or the monetary policy perspective in India, not from the perspective of the financing pattern of deficit, because it's not predominantly external in the context of India. Now, I also explained that we can't do bond financing beyond a point. We have to go back to the synerage financing the moment the R greater than G, right? So that's why inflation today or inflation tomorrow is the only flexible parameter. And it also relates to the literature on, first mover advantage, like central bank and the fiscal policy authorities who is given the first mover advantage. If it's a central bank independence, then entire thing will reverse because we believe in central bank independence and then the fiscal policy will follow. That didn't happen in India because all what we seek in terms of independence from the monetary policy front is operational. It's an operational independence with MPC, not a goal independence. So CBI is not the context to test in emerging country like India. So that's it. Now I'll get back. This is clear, no? Yeah, ask me.
That change is, I think, not required. R dot change of D is not required, I think. It's only D.
D minus 1. And that will be better. I will not.
No, that change is also not required. Rate of interest to previous debt, no? Change is not required, I think. Delta is not required.
Rate of interest in the past debt. Yes, of course. You are right. Because, the past debt, DT minus 1, this is the way we do the effective interest rate. Like interest rate is plenty in the context of India. So we arrive at the effective rate by taking the past debt into the, this is of course a change. It's a deficit, but this is like whether there is, okay. I can just cut it off this into past debt. That's an interest payment. Thank you for pointing it out. Now, any questions on this? No question? Okay, I'll come back. Okay, in the beginning of my talk, I also mentioned that the public goods theory, it is static. So on the basis of the static public good theories, we can't do the financing pattern of public goods. Then we got into this Wagner, Peacock, Weissman, all these things, and the financing pattern of deficit. But one thing I mentioned in the beginning is democracy determines public expenditure. So we need to look into those theories from the public choice literature to understand how the democracy determines public expenditure. Now, let me start with that Herwig's result. I mentioned to you already that Herwig's implication of the Herwig's result is that it is not possible to design mechanisms for demand revolution of a public good which simultaneously satisfy Pareto optimality, incentive compatibility, and a balanced budget. So can the degree of arbitrariness of a supply of a pure public good be explained using the voting models? This is a question asked by Alan Peacock. I mentioned to you to read that. Now let's get into this question. So far, things didn't work for us very well. Static public goods cannot be used by Gulati or NIPFP or Ministry of Finance to design the financing of a public good. So what could be it? When I talk about the uh, goods, what do you call the public choice theories? We need to begin with Anthony Downs. Anthony Downs, he spoke about the democracy, and in that book, you need to understand how he has framed the equation. Like the utils you derive from your voting pattern, right? That depends on many things, many factors. So, what Anthony Downs explained was that voting becomes an irrational act if the cost of voting is greater than the benefits you derive from the voting. And also, the moment you think that the way you can influence a voting pattern is just insignificant to the broad denominator of the number of voters or the population in your country, you don't vote. So there are many ways in which he explained why it can be a bizarre, but he also explains the components in which this equation can be. Okay, I will explain. It is a simple equation. So what Anthony Downs in his book explain is that you can read that book 1957, Anthony Downs, An Economic Theory of Democracy. That's a book for the public choice literature. Okay, so what he explained is that the reward you get from the voting in utils depends on the benefits you derive when your candidate win the election, that is B. And second is the probability of your candidate win the election, that is B. Benefits can be your candidate or any candidate if you focus on the benefits in a broad term. But minus C, P into B minus C, because if the cost of the voting psychic cost, waiting cost, many costs are there. It's a cognitive process. Like cognition has cost. നമുക്കൊന്നും ചിന്തിക്കാൻ ഇഷ്ടമില്ല. ആരെങ്കിലും ചിന്തിച്ചു തന്നാലേ നമ്മൾ പോയി വോട്ട് ചെയ്യും. So cognition is a cost. അപ്പം there are many costs. So if that C is greater than the benefits and the probability of your candidate winning the election, then your rewards from the voting in terms of utils will be insignificant. Then you prefer no to vote rather than vote. Then the literature advanced. That's a main criticism of this Anthony Downs. And then there is, his name is William Ricker. I'm trying to search for that. There are a lot of notes. I will give it to him. He will circulate into Suma. Okay. Another political scientist, American political scientist, William Ricker, worked with this equation by applying a D to it. D means you have a sense of duty or a civic duty, or you have the rights, because many of us vote not to get any benefits or to support our candidate winning the election. Most of us go and vote, it is a duty. So the moment you put that D, which you believe that it's a huge D, it's greater than the cost, then that equation can be balanced. Then there won't be any preference no to vote rather than vote. Okay, so it's like it depends on the probability of your candidate winning the election, the benefits you derive from the voting, the cost and the duty elements. Then you can test this theory by applying it to pre-elections. You can go and ask the people using the survey methodology. You can test this theory that what is predominant. But there are many elements which are not captured by this basic voting model. In the sense, it can be a combination of two variables. It cannot be watertight compartmentalization, and you can do a binary like cost or benefit. You can't do that. And also, many people support candidates knowing that he's going to fail or she's going to fail. So there are many elements. And also, people vote in retrospect. So some students study how the people vote in retrospect based on the previous policy. So how do you capture? And these are, last time also I mentioned about Reza, who is from Max Planck, right? And Reza's question was how people vote in retrospect. She modeled it using lab experiments, behavioral. Okay, she has done her thesis in Max Planck. So there are different ways in which you can ask these questions and connect to the public expenditure decisions. And dual hypothesis. Now, the recent literature related to the democracy and public spending, that's done by Esther Duflo. And there is a gender element to this question as well. Like she asked a question like democracy, if you're determining a person to be on board, if she's a woman, given that 72nd and 73rd and 74th Amendment, yeah, in the lowest tier of the government, like if you have more women on board, if there is a feminization of governance, can that translate into the public expenditure decisions favoring women's needs? Democracy and public expenditure decisions. So there are different ways in which you can ask this question. Then people also looked into the career theories. Like it is not exactly the economic factors that affect the public expenditure decisions, but also the career theories that affects the public expenditure decisions. So when I speak about the fundamentals of this public finance theories, I cannot stop at pure public goods theories or financing pattern. We need to advance the literature by looking into the public choice as well as career theories. I think I stop here, 10:30. We have only half an hour left. We will open the floor and take questions. So you don't want a recap of the lecture, right? I wrote a recap, like we began with the public goods literature by attacking this non-rival and non-excludable using the lighthouse example. And we came to the conclusion that the publicness is a transitory phenomenon. Okay, then we got into the different degrees of the goods in between these two strict public and private. It can be club good and it can be common property rights. Then I explained to you about the theories of the public expenditure, the Wagner, Peacock, Weissman hypothesis, and the major debates related to the crowding out, unpleasant monetary arithmetic, fiscal theories of price determination, and opened up the recent literature on the fiscal rules. Then we also spoke about, discussed about the mechanism designs in which the public good, that incentive compatibility, Pareto optimality, and the balanced good, how can you simultaneously arrive at that? And it is impossible to do that mechanism design convergence. Then the final, we stopped at the level of the seniorage financing to bond financing, external and internal, and its macroeconomic consequences. So, and now I will open the floor and take questions from you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your that wonderful talk. I think you covered almost all the major things. And some of the books are really new to me, that Anthony Don's Economic Theory of Democracy and all. I think we have to purchase some of the books for our library, I think, in this. And now I think the floor is open. You can make use of this time, half an hour. I mean, those who are working on strictly on public finance and related to public finance, anybody can ask question. I mean, you clarify. I think, yeah. Particularly first, yes.
Anjali Krishna. Ma'am, my question regarding you mentioned about the metrics, that is excludability and rivalry, where we can put the merit goods, and that is my first question. And what is the importance of government intervention in merit good?
We'll collect all the questions, then she'll respond.
Thank you, ma'am, for the lecture. Ma'am, you mentioned about the balanced budget in the mechanism design. So, like, why a balanced budget? So that is my first question. Then you were mentioning about how the bond market is more financing the deficit. So there is this shortage of household savings that we are facing now. So how do we place this? And also a little bit more clarity on how the senorage, it's on. So you mentioned senorage, how leads to inflation. So you also mentioned about how, again, the bond market, when the rate of interest is greater than your growth, it again leads to the inflationary. So a little bit more clarity.
Sure.
Okay.
Jijo, Shijo.
Yeah.
No.
Ma'am, one more question regarding the mixed good. Can you please explain?
Ma'am, my question name Surya. My question is related to public debt. So the redistributive effect of public debt is more debatable issue in recent public finance literature. So theoretically, there is a book by Hagen that is Public Debt, Inequality and Power. So he explained the public debt increases the inequality, but empirically we have mixed result in cross-country analysis. So what is your take on this aspect?
Sure. Thank you. Ritik. He's yeah, online he asked. Yeah.
Even interact.
Definitely. Definitely. You can open up, you need not confine to the lecture. Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand what you are saying. Like, not like that. In the first part, we have covered these public good theories. Like, it is more or less an individualistic center approach.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So these mathematical modeling, like even Steffi asked about balance budgeting. This kind of mathematical modeling doesn't work when we comes to a collective space.
Absolutely.
Like we have these Wayanad landslides now, and we have collected within a 1 week like 100 more than 100 crores. This is a kind of collective sensibility or collectiveness. That's what led to financing a public good, and that I think I can connect with this William.
Ricard.
Yeah, his uh, public choice theory regarding duty and cost of. So I'm just trying to articulate things like that only, and I have some questions regarding this price, the interest rate determination. Recently, I have read John Smith's works, and he says that the real interest rate, which has been determined by the profitability of the financial capitalist, and there is a negotiation between the financial capitalist and the industrial capitalist. Like so, and where the role of government comes in, when government couldn't through their monetary means control the inflation, not interest rate,
Interest rates. Yeah.
then and it's all determined by the profitability things and all. Then what's the role of the government actually? It's a little bit tricky. Yeah.
Yes, done. Sure.
I have to think of a question.
Yeah.
Ma'am, I'm working in international reserve accumulation and Nivedita.
Nivedita, yes. Yeah, tell me.
Yeah, ma'am, my work is on international reserves accumulation and its macroeconomic implications for emerging market economies. So, can you provide some insights on the fiscal implications of this international reserve accumulation on these emerging market economies, other than the external debt? So, I need.
Sure. Okay. You're towards the end of your thesis? Second year. Okay, okay, good. Who asked you to work on this? Nije, I mean, self. Self. Supervisor in the international finance. Okay, but it's not a fiscal question, right? It's not macro. It's a macro question. So you want to link the international finance with fiscal. It is possible. Yeah. Yeah. You were very attentive. Yeah, you can ask questions.
My name is Anand. I wanted to ask that relationship between bond and interest rate and inflation. So that question, Steffi asked that question. So
Okay, Steffi already preempted that question. Okay.
Ma'am, I would like to get clarity on the bond financing. What happens? Like you mentioned that if the country has a bond financing beyond a point, there will be crowding out. So I would like to get clarity on.
Sure. Okay. Gopika, yes.
Okay, you mentioned about the primary deficit should be your target than the physical deficit. Can you explain the rationale behind
Yeah,
it?
sure. We covered almost everybody in that boy with specs. Yeah. Aniraj. Commerce, okay.
Actually, the thing is that I am studying public finance for the first time. I like after coming to here only. My background is not related to economics and all. So you have mentioned about three conditions: Pareto optimality, and like incentive compatibility and all. So can you explain like this? What I understand from incentive compatibility is that through these public finance classes is that when people pay taxes, and like when they for some benefit and government is trying to charge impose more tax and they try to redistribute to the poor people, so these higher people will be de-incentivized because they are like paying higher taxes and or not for the taxes they are paying, they are not getting the actual benefit and it is redistributed to the poor people. So whether that is connected to this incentive compatibility that you mentioned, or that kind of.
I'll explain.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay.
Ma'am, my name is Munawra Zubair. So, ma'am, you have mentioned that uh, there are some people who would openly say their preference, and some they would strategically say their preference, and over the period of time, they will come to a consensus. Could you please explain that process, like how they would come into that consensus? And also, there are certain goods wherein they deliberately keep the prices low for some people and high for some people. So there is an welfare element in that thing, right? So bringing the price equal to both, how will that affect the welfare?
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yeah. Ashkar, no questions? No questions. No questions. Arun and Indu. Indu, no question. Steffi asked, Munna asked, Nivedita asked, and yeah, Richu. Oh, sure. Climate. No questions? She's Richu. Who is Meka? Meka, I remember you. Yes, Mekana.
You said that debt can be financed in three ways, right? Senerage, bond financing, and external financing. So this works everywhere in the world, right? Like public debt is managed like that. And everyone knows that these are the three mechanisms. Then how would, I mean, it's a very out of this thing, curiosity question. Then how does crisis happen then? Like if you can finance, if everyone knows this happens, I mean, these are the three mechanisms. Then how do countries go into crisis? I mean, is it the mismanagement of these three things, or are there other factors that determine it? It's a very silly,
thank you.
very silly,
Yeah,
silly question.
I understand. Thank you. Mike. Okay. Okay. Did I miss anybody? Shiju ഒളിച്ചിരിക്കുകയാണ്. Blue. Indu, yes. Yeah. Still you can ask or you can appreciate me. I'll be very happy. Indu is from commerce, huh? Grishma? First year, okay.
Ma'am, there are certain goods we categorized as public goods, but after continuous usage, it has some negative effect, right? So government itself will prevent people from usages. So
ഒരു എക്സാമ്പിൾ പറയടാ ഇത്
Forest
which
is a public good, right?
which public good beyond a threshold use we will get. You meant negative
Yeah, that is
externalities.
my question. Is there any
Negative
good
externalities.
purely we can term as public good? Because
Huh.
yeah,
You're speaking like Alan Peacock. That is exactly what's the point. Like, I mentioned in the beginning that this public goods theory is this strict watertight compartmentalization that is impossible, for us to design the financing because the publicness is a transitory phenomenon. I think I have mentioned this point million times. Exactly, this is the question. We can't, get into that publicness. Publicness is transitory, it differs. And her question related to the merit good, we are talking about the goods which is having the positive externality. So that came into existence because we started thinking about certain goods having positive externality, like the social cost is greater than the private cost. That's how this merit goods came into being. So let me I forgot to ask the girl, yeah, Amalu, okay.
Ma'am, one among the debates you mentioned,
Yeah.
fiscal theories on price discrimination.
Correct.
So when determination, yeah, sorry. So whenever fiscal policy is inflationary, could we think of any countermeasures other than monetary policy? In situations where, in situations like fiscal expansion, where fiscal expansion is unavoidable, is there any other countermeasures other than monetary policy?
Everybody spoke to me now, sir.
Ma'am, I have one
They
final
preempted.
question.
Sure.
Ma'am,
Look
this
in
is
here.
not,
Yeah, ask me.
ma'am, this is not related to the class,
Mm.
but it's kind of related to my thesis work.
Mm.
So I had hit a roadblock in my thesis work, as in, so we have environment as one of the public goods.
Mm.
So I had taken budgetary expenditure on environment
Mm.
as representing climate finance.
Mm.
But then there were suggestions that we cannot classify it as climate finance. So is it correct, or should I move ahead with the suggestion, or should I continue with what I'm doing? Like,
Continue with what you're doing. What you say as climate finance is climate finance because you have a framework. You must have defined it based on certain components. So you have to justify because the new failed. We are facing the same issue. Broadly, you identify the 8 components. That is common for everybody. Within 8 components, if you're telling that this program is climate financing, that is climate financing. Otherwise, talk to the department people. Should I take it out or should I keep? What you decide will be the future policy of the nation because nobody has done it so far. You have to help. Yeah, that's the answer. Okay. So yeah, sure. Yeah, I didn't ask both of you.
No, actually, I've been taking some of the classes for the first years.
Mm.
And I mean, most of your part, I mean, I could feel little lopsided to the neoclassical terms, and explanations and all. But you haven't touched anything on Keynesian multiplier or the Musgravian, you purposefully made it like that, or
Okay.
you want to have a long run. I mean, Keynesian broadly short-term economics.
I deliberately took it out of my lecture because my online lecture was entirely Keynesian last time,
Okay.
and they all enjoyed that component. So I thought that in order to bring a perspective, we should get into all the things. You remember, my talk was entirely Keynesian when I was online. I was talking. Yeah. So we should get into all the theories now. Yeah. Yeah. Keynesian was subtle in it. Yes. Yeah. So everybody spoke to me. Suma. Yeah.
Frankly speaking, I'm learning after long years public finance, and it was a very good lecture for me, learning the basics. So I'll ask next day.
Later. Nirmal, I can see you. Come here. We can't hear. Ingiva. Microphone iva. Adil. Akhil. Okay.
Thank you, Lekha, ma'am. Since you have asked, like I was planning to ask towards the end when you leave the thing. One thing is with regard a clarification regarding the decentralization and the literature. I mean, I couldn't. I mean, note it down. What's the exact kind
Sure.
of thing? Second thing is a broader discussion issue with regard to your take on the dwindling private investment for the last maybe 1 decade or so, in which India didn't have or the world didn't have that much of a geopolitical scenario, even though we didn't have a geopolitical much bigger issue like that we have right now. Coupled with the fact that we also gave a lot of rebates on corporate taxes, still the private investments are not taking up. Is it because of the fact that they are kind of subverting their, I mean, income or investment money to something else?
You said it.
Maybe I just want to have
Yes,
your,
yeah.
I mean, perspective on that.
Sure.
Thank you.
One more question you had on
I
decentralization.
mean, we were
private
talking
and-
about the gender dimension of like when we are feminizing the
governance.
representation kind of
Yes.
thing. I mean, you were talking about one author. I couldn't note it
The
down.
flow, Esther the flow.
Esther.
Nobel, Esther
Oh,
work.
okay, okay. Oh,
Yeah,
oh,
the randomized control trial.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, no, got it. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you. What about Adil? Akhil. Ingiva. Ingiva. Akhil, right? You have new faculty member here.
Yes. Commerce background.
Sure.
So I would like to know more about helicopter finance. You mentioned, right? At that
Helicopter money. Okay.
helicopter money.
Okay. Sure. So we are ready to go. My God, I am in a race against time, you know. Yeah, I will be very brief. And if you have more, I mean, if you require more explanation, we will take it later. Anjali Krishnan asked me about the merit good. It is not based on that strict matrices, but we consider the merit goods based on the positive externalities, and the social cost is greater than private cost concept. So what I was explaining to you is the basic four matrices. Now more things are coming up and mix it. These are all blame to NIPFP. Like we created like the new kind of merit good to work out the subsidies. Okay, so it all came with the empirical and the practical examples. It's not from the theories that it developed, this merit good concept and all. And now Steffi's question on the balanced budget, and that we need to understand how this balanced budget can be, because there are a lot of criticisms about the mechanism design that the balanced budget cannot be one of the criteria, because we have moved away from the world of the balanced budget to the deficits. So that criteria is out of question. And regarding the savings as a part of this fiscal rules, we have to come through the Ricardian equivalence theorem. First, we have to ask the question whether we need to treat the fiscal deficit financing and the impact through the Keynesian manner, or the neoclassical manner, or the Ricardian. The moment you believe that it is Ricardian, you have to work it out with the savings perspective. Like it's a dynastic resources concept. And today's deficit is tomorrow's taxes. And that Ricardians is a framework in which you can calculate this household savings. And because, other than C. Rankarajan, nobody has worked out Ricardian's equivalence theorem and the impact of deficit. Most of us work through, even including my papers, we're all Keynesian to work out this question. Now, R is greater than G, leading to the inflationary pressures in unpleasant monetary arithmetic, because the bond financing cannot go on if the real rate of interest is greater than real growth of economy. So eventually you go back to the original source of financing the deficit, that is the seigniorage financing of deficit. So if you do that eventual monetization, then that can be inflationary because you're doing it through seigniorage. That's why, you control. We will talk it up later. And Anjali, next question on mixed good. It's not a part of the theory. It's all the practical way in which these are discussed, in which, elements are incorporated. Now the question by Surya on the public debt and the redistributive effect, inequality. I do believe that the public good, if it is articulated by the R and G as a debt sustainable condition, and if you're using it for, the social infrastructure policies, that will help to reduce inequality, not widen the inequality. That's my answer to you. If it is social infrastructure, but capital infrastructure and inequality, of course, there could be a link. And Ritik's question on the methodology or the mathematical models, I was explained to you through the public goods, that is not suiting for the real world public goods because you are considering climate change as a public good. I invite you to work on this with me. Because there is a paper in Cambridge Journal of Economics. They looked into Lighthouse Revisited, like Alan Peacock's, Samuelson's, and one more person, Coase. Their theories and their debate is looked into from a new perspective these days. So we should start looking to that example, Lighthouse Revisited, and how this argument of the public good, because I mentioned it is transitory, it's now getting into new spheres, including climate change. So you read that Cambridge Journal of Economics, the Lighthouse Revisited, and how we can argue that the static public goods fail. We need to enhance the space for incorporating new public goods like climate change, then how we can take it ahead. And you have stopped with the public choice. Can we use the democracy determining this with that? I don't know. It's all like very original thoughts, but you think it's starting your reading from the Revisited, Lighthouse Revisited. That's exactly this question that we can't do much with the public goods. Then that revisited framework, you incorporate climate and we can take it ahead. It's a challenge. If it is moving, let it move. Otherwise, it can be a small 1,000 words. Okay, send it to me thinking about that. Journal of Cambridge Economics. Now the question, who asked me about the determination of interest rate? ഞാൻ തന്നെ. That's why I didn't put the new name over here. Okay, yeah, you are right. When the financial capital determines the interest rate determination, how can you say what is the role of the government to do the interest rate determination? But now, everything is rules based, and we have a rules based new monetary framework on board. Like we thought that when we peg the interest rates, especially the repo rate, using the expectations channel, we are able to control the inflation. And interest rate determination is predominantly now based on the inflationary expectations. The profit is not getting captured over there. But your question is real, that how you can work with the financial capital variables the moment you incorporate. But the question, then we have to use the CMI data and the firm level data, because what I explained to you is a macro question of interest rate determination. But your question is related to the firm level profits. So the unit of analysis will be different. I am ready to look into whether firm level specifics like some financial ratios or financial profitability matter, or the public policy matter. That question we need to ask. It's like a impact of the public finance on the firm level decisions. It's a different kind of a literature. The moment we get into the profits, it has to be using the CMI data. That has to be looked at from a different perspective. Mine was macro. Now, Nivedita, your question related to I will talk to you later. The only thing which is coming to my mind is the quasi fiscal cost. We have done a quasi fiscal cost of the financial, I mean the forex reserves. So whether that channel works for you, you can, but it is insignificant. So we can talk about it later. Now, Anand, your question on the rate of interest and the inflation, we need to work it out. Where is Anand? Yeah, your question was like bond market financing is leading to the increase in the inflation, not interest rate. I mentioned that interest rate may not be determined by this bond market operations if it is crowding in. Then you ask back whether it can be inflationary. That needs to be looked into by looking the question related to the bond financing and inflation. The fiscal deficit and inflation, whether fiscal deficit is inflationary, that question need to be looked into. This is also a very good empirical question which we can take up later. Okay, I'm very fast because I'm in a race against time. Okay, we will talk about it. Very good question. And the crowding out you mentioned, yeah. Gopika, the primary deficit rule, yeah, we can read Arvind Subramaniam's article or that dissent note to understand why the primary deficit is important. Usually, when it comes to the debt servicing, the ratio which we use so far is interest payments to the revenue receipt ratio. How much of your own revenue you are using for the interest payments? But Indira Rajaraman suggested another variable, like use the primary deficit. You use your fiscal stance, which is discretionary in nature, take out the inflationary payments. So there are two ways to articulate. One is you're looking at the current fiscal policy stance, exchange rate. Interest rate is exogenous. That is why I told it exchange rate. Interest rate is exogenous. Your debt servicing you can articulate through the discretionary fiscal space, not by the entire fiscal space. You take out the inflationary payments. And third point is that if Finance Commission can use this IP to RR ratio, they can replace it with the primary deficit ratio. Will it be more helpful? If you look into the primary deficit instead of looking into the interest payments as a percentage of revenue receipts. This is a question asked by Indra Rajaraman. So these are the two people who talked about primary deficit as a component rather than fiscal. Now, Riju, no question. Meghna's question is, how crisis happens if they know, if you're finance minister, you have certain public expenditure decisions. You need to finance it. How do you do that? It depends on your way of thinking. In many countries, if you're an MMT person, modern monetary theorist and all, you will do a little bit of monetization of deficit. Know that you have inflationary pressures in the economy, and you say that my inflation will be controlled through the inflation targeting framework by the center bank. I will go ahead with my seigniorage financing. You can take a decision, but the consequence will be overheating. You have to face that. But most of the finance ministers don't take the decision of seigniorage. They go for internal bond financing, but they have to face the music that you will crowd out. Then Nirmala Sitharaman, how she defended 75% of deficit financed in our country using the bond financing. She defended that it is crowding in because I am using it for capex. Each mode of financing pattern of deficit, as you mentioned, if it is beyond a particular threshold, it is macroeconomic crisis. Public policy makers' job use a thing that it is easy. It is not easy. Interest rate determination, you can say that you control your inflationary expectations. We have done, it's easy, but when we work, we have to work with different elements. So, for example, right now, we have a strict rules-based monetary policy framework, and everybody thought it's going to be a clean monetary macro. Then came the supply side shocks. From the supply side shocks, how do you channelize through the expectations channel? It's not strictly monetary. There are many simultaneous macroeconomic questions arise. It won't be, no decisions by a public policy maker will be neat. Crises happen, like it is not a pre-notion or a predetermined thing. You mentioned that there are three modes of financing deficit. We know that we pick up one among them, then how can it lead to crisis? What you pick, that itself can lead to crisis if it's beyond a point. What you pick? If you pick seigniorage, you get inflation. If you pick bond financing, you get this crowding out questions. If you pick external, you are into the external balance of payment crisis.
So
Yes,
it's like
yeah,
the thing is like it's kind of dynamic. It depends upon the situation. So you have
absolutely.
to adapt to it.
Yeah. Yeah, because in India, we have adapted like from seigniorage to the bond financing over the years because we are facing fiscal profligacy and inflationary pressures. So we have to take that shift in the decisions. Public policy is dynamic. Yeah. And Munna's question of sincere versus strategic. Munna, I need to clarify that I set taxes, not prices. Because if you have individual atomized taxes, that is a way in which the Vixel worked out. Like the people who are paid less taxes, not prices, less taxes, they may increase the quantity of consumption because, the taxation. I will give the Lintel Vixel iteration theorem to him. He will hand it over to you, the mechanism design. So there, they talked about an itemized taxes in the Lintel Vixel. So in that specific iterative model I mentioned, Individualistic taxes led to this convergence. Like those who are paying less taxes will increase the consumption and more decrease their, utility from that. And overall, it comes to that. But that article stops with a sentence that free riding is wished away, convergence is wished away. They were all trying, just like the way he and Ritik mentioned, these are mathematical models, okay? But they also got Nobel Prize, neoclassicals, yeah. Now the question, 11, 12, my goodness. Grishma, public goods center, fiscal policy of price determination. That can be inflationary. Amlu asked, right? I will get back to you regarding that, okay? If there is inflationary components which cannot be controlled totally by the monetary, if the inflation is fiscal, then fiscal policy has got a role to play over there. That's why, in the current macro monetary framework, we have a subtle understanding that growth recovery process will be handled by keeping the fiscal deficit accommodative. Price and inflation will be tackled by RBI. That is not working because the fiscal policy has got a role to play in controlling the inflation when it is predominantly supply side. So I don't take, like you, I don't take the call that inflation is strictly monetary. It is fiscal as well. Okay. Now, Ranjit's question, 100% agree that I didn't talk about the Keynesian in this talk because my thesis is Keynesian, my all papers are Keynesian, my last talk was Keynesian. So in order to give you a balanced perspective, I didn't talk about the Keynesian literature of the role of government much in this talk. Now, Nirmal's question of fiscal decentralization. I mentioned that the Thibaut's hypothesis and Oates theorem, that is a Valley-Oates theorem, like the principle of subsidiarity in which the level of the government closest to the people take the decisions better than the top level government. So with the advent of fiscal decentralization, we have to take most decisions at the level closest to the people. That's what, and it is sectoral also. There is environmental federalism, which believes that the climate change related questions can be dealt with at the local level than the center level. So there are different ways in which public finance advanced with the advent of the fiscal decentralization, and predominant among them is this environmental federalism. I will talk about it little later, okay, through the emails. Now, the question of private investment, we will talk later. Uh, you know, Corporate taxes, we will talk later. Akhil's question about helicopter money, I will give you my paper. There is a good review paper. One Samiksha from Gokhale Institute worked with me as a summer intern. So that time, this helicopter money was the huge question. So I asked her to map all the literature related to the helicopter money, and she has done a good job. And we sent it to Pulapre Balakrishnan and got some comments. That paper, I will send it to you. You get all the references related to the helicopter money there. Okay, we have done that work. Now, yes, I've done. So the climate change, whom did I miss the climate change? Because Surya's. Who asked the climate? Riju's climate change question. I already spoke to Nirmal that about the environmental federalism. You take a look into that, in which we have three standard setting functions. Like the first standard setting function is the international public good, climate change as an international public good. Second is interjurisdictional spillover. We need to look into using two governments coming together. Third is the climate change as a local good. So you read the Wallace Oates, I was mentioning him about the environmental federalism, and get into these three standard setting functions. Okay, and thank you so much. And I was like, race against time and to overshoot by, this is mine or yours? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am. I think some of the things we'll take it forward. I think I have one or two lectures pending. Some of the things I'm interested. I'll get into detail about this thing. I think later some time you can ask more questions. We need more of your time later time. I will check with Joseph sir for that.
Thank you. Thank
And
you so much.
I request Steffi to say one more of thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Lekha ma'am. It was very pleasure meeting you, interacting with you. So you have, it was a very interesting lecture, and you have touched a tip of several icebergs so that people can read more now, think in depth. So thank you for that. Looking forward to have more lectures and interactions with you. We also thank our PhD coordinators for arranging this session and all the technical staff for making all the arrangements. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you.